Back in 1735, a single courtroom drama played out that didn't just decide one man's fate, it actually helped forge one of the most fundamental liberties we have today. I'm talking about freedom of the press. So let's get into how this all went down.
I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine a world where telling the absolute, verifiable truth about a corrupt official wasn't just risky, it could literally land you in prison. Well, in colonial America, that was imagination. That was the law.
Okay, so our story kicks off in New York. The whole colony is just simmering with tension under its new royal governor, a guy who saw his job less as a public service and more as, a golden ticket. His name was William Cosby. And Cosby, he wasted zero time. He wasn't subtle about it either. He was handing out huge salaries to his buddies, he grabbed a massive piece of land for himself, and he kept his friendly government in place by just not calling new elections. But the real kicker, the thing that pushed people over the edge? Pure greed. He demanded half the salary from the guy who had the job before him, Rip Van Dam. Now, to get his money, Cosby just went around the whole system. He knew a jury of colonists would never side with him, so what did he do? He just created his own special court with no jury. But the colony's chief justice, a man named Lewis Morris, stood up to him and defended the right to a jury trial. Cosby's response? He didn't argue, he just fired him. That sent a pretty clear message, right? The law was whatever William Cosby said it was. So now, with the courts and the government completely under Cosby's thumb, the opposition, led by the freshly fired Chief Justice Morris, they're cornered. They really only had one weapon left to fight back with, but it was a powerful one: the printing press. See, up to this point, New York only had one newspaper, the Gazette, and it was basically the governor's personal PR machine. So the opposition decided to create a rival paper, the New York Weekly Journal. They hired a German printer named John Peter Zenger, and the paper's entire purpose was to go after the governor with everything they had: sharp essays, political cartoons, you name it. And believe me, they did not pull their punches. Zinger's paper wasn't just whining about policy. No, it was framing the fight in the most dramatic terms possible, warning people that Cosby's actions were going to lead the entire colony into slavery. I mean, this was explosive stuff for the time. Well, Governor Cosby was furious, absolutely furious. He couldn't stand being criticized, so he did what tyrants always do. He went after the source. He had John Peter Zenger arrested and thrown in jail. He was determined to shut him up, to silence the press, and make an example out of him. And just like that, the stage was set for a landmark trial. But here is the crazy legal trap Zenger was in. He was charged with something called seditious libel. Now, under the law back then, the crime wasn't lying about the government. The crime was criticizing the government at all. The logic was completely upside down from how we see things today. Get this. The more truthful your criticism was, the more dangerous and illegal it was considered, because it was more likely to actually turn people against their rulers. This setup made the trial feel like an open and shut case. The law said the jury could only decide one thing, a simple fact. Did Zenger print the papers, yes or no? That's it. The judge, who of course worked for Cosby, would then decide if the words were illegal. And since Zenger never denied printing them, a guilty verdict looked like a slam dunk. And if that wasn't bad enough, when Zinger's first lawyers dared to challenge the judge's authority, the judge just had them disbarred. Poof! Stripped of their ability to practice law. So let's recap. Zenger is in jail, the law says truth is no defense, the judge works for his enemy, and now he has no lawyers. The situation looked completely and utterly hopeless. And then the trial takes an unbelievable turn. On the day of the trial, this legal superstar from Philadelphia, a guy named Andrew Hamilton, makes a surprise appearance to defend Zenger for free. And the very first thing he does is stand up and say this. He admits to the only fact the jury was even supposed to be deciding. The whole courtroom was stunned. What on earth was he thinking? He was thinking way bigger. See, by admitting to the printing, Hamilton changed the entire game. He wasn't defending Zenger anymore. He was putting the law of seditious libel itself on trial. He argued that this law was an instrument of tyranny. He declared that people have a natural right to speak out when their government harms them. And here's the most important part. He told the jury that they had the power and the right to judge not just the facts, but whether the law itself was just. Hamilton had completely bypassed the judge and was speaking directly to the 12 colonists sitting in that jury box.
He basically handed them the power to decide the case on their own terms, based on their own conscience. The fate of press freedom in America was now in their hands. After only a few minutes, the jury came back. Their verdict was a single, defiant phrase that would echo through the colonies: not guilty. The courtroom just erupted in cheers. What that jury did has a name, It's called jury nullification. It's when a jury says not guilty, even if they know the defendant is technically guilty by the book. They do it because they believe the law itself is fundamentally unjust. They knew Zenger printed those papers, but they refused to enforce a law they believed was wrong. They chose justice over the letter of the law. And this is the real takeaway from the whole thing. Legally, on paper, nothing changed. The law of seditious libel was still a thing. But politically, it changed everything. The verdict sent a powerful message. A jury of American colonists was never going to convict a printer for criticizing the government. Suddenly, the risk of being publicly humiliated was too high for these royal governors, so they just stopped trying to prosecute. So this one single verdict, this incredible act of defiance by a dozen ordinary men, it created a whole new reality in America. It established a freedom of the press in practice, long, long before it was ever written down into law. And a generation that would go on to lead the American Revolution, they grew up knowing just how important this moment was. As the founding father Gouverneur Morris later put it, the Zenger Trial was the germ of American freedom, the very first spark of liberty that would eventually lead to a whole new nation. You can honestly draw a straight line from this verdict right to the Constitution. Because governors were now too afraid to prosecute critics, a vibrant, outspoken press was able to flourish, and that press became the essential tool for spreading revolutionary ideas in the 1760s and 70s. So when it finally came time to write the Bill of Rights, the principle that had been won in that New York courtroom back in 1735 was officially protected for all time in the First Amendment. And so that brings us back to the heart of the matter. The Zenger trial was never really just about newspapers. It was about power. The power of the state versus the conscience of its citizens. And it leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was nearly 300 years ago. What is the jury's role when a law and justice just don't agree?